you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there are these things that makes official. Welcome to the oldest living podcast that still produces 1 to 2 new shows a day that we publish. No one else is doing that or keeping up with us from the original shows from the 2000s. So we are the oldest darn living broadcast to a certain degree. They still do once a year, once a week, once a month, every couple of days. But we do daily. So go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss for your family, friends, and relatives. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, facebook.com/Chris Voss, and linkedin.com/Chris Voss. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today, an amazing young man on the show. We're going to be talking about his book, Unless: God's Way of Altering Our Attitudes, Actions, and Aftermath by Kevin Gephart. He joins us on the show. We're going to be talking about his insights, some of his learnings, and all that stuff, and why he wrote the darn books already. He's a multi-book author, by the way. Kevin lives in Middletown, Delaware, with his best friend and loving wife, Cindy. They've served the Lord in various ministries and capacities in Michigan, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Delaware for over 40 years. They have 3 grown children and 6 grandchildren. Kevin's life passage is Psalms 63, 1-3. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My body longs for you in dry and weary land where there is no water. That's the same notes I write to girls on Tinder. Anyway, he's been in the sanctuary and beheld the power and glory of God and talks about in his book, I guess. Well, welcome to the show. How are you, Kevin?
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. That's some introduction, especially when you said young man. I appreciate it.
It's an old Carson
Awesome.
Letterman trick I learned. You gas up your guests and they'll feel really good during the show and give a great interview.
I'm pumped.
Does it work if I say people are prepubescent? Maybe that's too young.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the show, Kevin. Give us your
.coms.
I think that's for, never mind. I'm not even going to do the Epstein joke. Anyway, so give us .coms. Where can people find out more about you on the interwebs?
Right now, I'm on Facebook. They can look up my name, Kevin Gephart, or my actual business, if you will, or my site on Facebook is The Flourishing Soul, which is my first book that I wrote.
And you have 3 books total that you've published?
I have 4. I'm working on my 5th. Yes,
all right.
Sir.
See, I knew that. I was just setting you up for,
You were just testing me. I get it.
I want to make people think, oh, he's got more than 3. He's got 4. He's prolific. And we got one on the way. So we'll get into all that, but let's talk about a 30,000 overview of what's inside this book, Unless.
We like to measure or quantify a lot of things that we have or that we do when God really only asks us for the obvious. In other words, when Jesus was here and he called his disciples, he simply said, follow me. And if we do that, the rest pretty much takes care of itself. The idea of unless was the prompting of the Holy Spirit. As I read through my Bible, I take notes, copious notes, blank pieces of paper in which I go back and study. And so unless are those moments that God acts in our life to strengthen our faith, to stretch our faith. Sometimes we don't like it, but God works in our life.
Still getting him to help me win the lottery. He's really bad at picking tickets. That's all I'm saying.
He is. I've asked him before. And I have no help.
It doesn't hurt to try, right? I'm an atheist, but it doesn't hurt to try. Fuck it. Yeah. Just, God, if you want to prove yourself to me, let me win this $5 gas station ticket. No, I'm just doing jokes. So now, what was the proponent that made you want to write this book? The aha moment where you sat down and said, darn, I've got this idea and I'm going to write out this concept.
I guess it really stemmed from my mom, who's now in heaven. My mom for years pestered me, bugged me, nagged me, if you will, guilted me as only a mom can to write a book. And I told Mom, I said, Mom, I'm not a famous person. I'm not a famous pastor. My name's not known. And she said something that she might as well just picked up a 2x4 and hit me alongside the head. She said, nope, you're not Chuck Swindoll and you're not Max Lucado or anyone else. You're Kevin Gephart, and you've been through a lot, and God has given you a message, and you need to tell other people about that.
Wow. So
I did. And what really prompted me, 7 years ago, I had quadruple bypass surgery. I had 200%, 199, 180. After I found out that I needed bypass surgery, my sister, I called my mom and I said, Mom, you win. I'll write a book. And she was really, really happy about that. 2 weeks later, after I told her, was when she went to heaven at 94. Oh, no. So anyway, so it was my mom who encouraged me and set me on this course.
Yeah, moms are good at that sometimes, where they can really help you see the vision. And plus, the last thing she remembers is you were going to do that book. So yeah, if you hadn't done that book, she'd probably come back and haunt you, if you don't mind me pulling that joke.
Sometimes I think she still does. Yeah. I still hear that voice back in the back of my head. Anyway,
now she's got you doing books.
Now she does.
Plural.
I can't stop.
You can't stop. Good. It's always good to have some influence. The influence I always have is just that fifth personality that I have that says kill, kill, kill all the time. But the judge says I can't listen to it anymore. So there's that too. That's what the lithium is for. Anyway.
Well, Percocet or whatever you want.
Yeah. The other, at least there's 32 other personalities in my head that they can.
That many?
Yeah. I mean, that's how hard they can count right now. But there's probably some wandering around there somewhere. Anyway, who's this? Anyway, I don't know. That was one of them right there. Give us some more flesh out of what you talk in the book. Is this like a memoir for you, or is this talking about with your experiences, or talking about some of the journeys that you went on with your faith?
Yeah, it's a combination of things, and really in all my books. This is my first book, The Flourishing Soul, based on Psalm 90:12, talking about how the soul flourishes like the palm tree and grows like the cedar in Lebanon. And I did a study on palm trees, a very interesting study, and found out how resilient they are to the storms. Very rarely would you see a palm tree through a hurricane. They bend all the way down, and that's how we're to be. So that's The Flourishing Soul. Then my second book was Unless. And I guess it comes through my ministry with teenagers, either through the Christian school movement or as a youth pastor, because I would often use that word unless. Listen, and whatever the child's name was, Jim, Sally, whoever, unless you do what God wants you to do, you're not going to find real purpose and meaning in life. And of course, teenagers, who do I marry? What should I do? Where do I go to college? All those types of questions that a 15, 16, 17-year-old has, as well as dealing with all of the aftermaths of their poor decisions. And so Unless came about from all of my moments and time in ministry, counseling with them, teaching them, and having those types of conversations.
And it looks like you did a lot here. You did some work in Michigan, Massachusetts, North Carolina, and Delaware, responsible for raising 3 Christian schools. Tell us about some of those experiences that you...
In Michigan, I was, at the age of 25, after I graduated from college, I became a Bible teacher in a Christian school. I was the assistant everything to all of the ministers. Basically, I was an intern, except I was getting paid for it. Very little, I might add, but I was getting paid for it and learning, if you will, the ropes. But in that Christian high school, there were so many teenagers that my name, the school went through a transition period where the pastor was looking for a new principal. And the pastor came to me and said, Kevin, I've had so many people come to me and said you would make a great administrator. And I said, Pastor, I just want you to know that that's not really my calling, but I'll do anything that God wants me to do. And I felt the inner promptings of the Spirit that this is where he was leading me. So I went off 3 different summers in educating myself in administration and teaching myself towards my master's in administration, and became a principal at 25, and then fully, if you will, at the age of 28. Then one of those ministers left that church, went to Massachusetts, called me up and said, church wants to start a Christian school. And so we went there. I was the youth pastor and Christian school administrator, starting from scratch. I was thinking that it was going to take a year, or that it was a year from the time that I got there. But when I got there, to my surprise, the people pushed and pushed and pushed. We put together a school over a summer.
Oh, wow.
That was a challenge. And so I started a Christian school. Then I had another friend who was in North Carolina, that Christian school in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It was very challenging because of Fort Bragg and Pope Air Force Base. That needed some direction. It was very directionless. They didn't have a student handbook. They didn't have a teacher's handbook. They had very little policy. So I just transferred a lot of the things that I had done in Rochester, Michigan, and transferred those thoughts and my expertise at the age of 29, my expertise, or 30, whatever it was, my expertise down in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And then we came to Delaware in 94. My brother-in-law was the pastor of the church. I came as the youth pastor, and then later as principal of the school. And all the schools, I might say, Chris, were all, I won't say desperate straits, but all of them needed help.
Yeah.
And God used me to bring those, if you will, institutions back to life.
What are the things that a lot of Christian schools are lacking that they really need help on? You need to step in there and get them up to par. What are some of the things that you see when you do that?
Well, the biggest, a lot of them, the rules and regulations. And I would often not necessarily get in trouble with my staff, but I'm a person that wants to reclaim. I want a person to recover. Just because some student made some dumb decision, did that mean that they needed to be expelled? Sometimes, yes. But most of the time, Chris, I just wanted to come alongside and connect with them. I'll tell you a story. His name was Bobby. His mom had gone through a divorce, and he really disliked his dad for doing that. In meeting in my office with him several times, Bobby came to the realization that it finally came out that he really, I'm going to use the word detest his dad for divorcing his mom.
Wow.
And for reasons that we can only imagine. And he says, in fact, Mr. Gephart, I hate you. And I said, why do you hate me? Wow. And he said, because you stand for authority and so forth. So he had a real authority issue and a poor relationship with dad. And so therefore he looked at all the men in his life. Oh. And so we went from there, and he came at me literally weeping and crying. I had another young lady, her name was Chris, and Chris had a major fight with her mom that morning and came in my office, and we had gone through some counseling sessions with her and talking with her. And when I say counseling, I'm primarily talking about listening, just sitting there and listening to them, what they have to offer, what they need. And Chris had that argument with her mom. Lo and behold, before Chris got home that night, mom was in an accident and passed away.
Oh, my God.
And she's been living with that. And we've been in contact with each other through the years, but she lived with that for a long, long time. Oh, wow. And so that's what I'm talking about, Chris, is that, and even so now, our society is so messed up, and so many kids are directionless, and they just need someone to listen to them and care for them and love them the way that Jesus would if he were here.
Yeah.
So I think that's the major thing, is just a real attitude of compassion and care. And I'm happy to say that we began to grow. We added grade after grade after grade as it came, as well as education. We obviously developed education as well.
What do you hope people come away with when they read your book?
I want them to understand that God has imperative truths. They're not suggestions. They're not called the 10 suggestions. They're called the 10 commandments. And lo and behold, we have problems dealing with those 10 commandments. And I'm not talking about all the things that the Jews have added with their traditions and so forth. I'm just talking about the basic things. And so when I take a look at unless, I want them to come away with this imperative truth. For instance, at the end of my first unless one is born again, God's imperative truth is that no one will live with God in his kingdom unless he comes to salvation by grace through faith, which is found only in Jesus Christ. So I summarize at the end of each of my chapters, I summarize pretty much what I've done. I've had people say, why don't you just say that? Would have been a short book. Well, I had to explain where we're going to get to the end of the road.
Yeah. You got to give stories and stuff too.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. That's really important. And you need to explain what the things are. Because some people just, you can give them a line and they're not going to get it. They're like, how does this work in or apply itself in real world? That's what you do in a book. You flesh that all out. Right. And so you've written the book. Now, tell us about the 2 other books that you have.
I've already mentioned The Flourishing Soul, and I'm really possessing a rich soul, developing a remarkable soul, living a Christian life based on the palm tree. And then my 3rd book is called Rescued. And one of my minors in college was history. And I love history because I don't want to repeat the dumb things that we've done in the past. So what I did was I did a research on famous rescue missions worldwide, like the raid on Entebbe back in when Idi Amin was in power and he took control of that airplane. My introduction I go in depth of D-Day on how all that developed. So I take famous rescues throughout history and I correlate those into the Christian life and how God rescues us from our situations. Sometimes we make really, really poor, dumb decisions. Other times, completely out of our control. Someone does something to us. It's going to be our reaction to those actions that really are going to determine our next course in life. And so that's Rescued. And then my 4th book is just a commentary on the book of James and reflections on wisdom, living godly lives in the daily grind. One of my college courses in Bible doctrines, the teacher said, I want you to choose an epistle and I want you to write each doctrine that's mentioned there in the book of James. And that's when I fell in love with James. It's such a practical book, down to earth. And Chris, my writing style is very conversational. A lot of the people that I know that have purchased my books, they literally tell me, Kevin, I can hear you talking as I read your books. And that's what I want to do. I use illustrations, obviously biblical illustrations, as well as personal illustrations in all my books.
That's good. You want to have that in your writing. You want to be able to have that consistency of your voice throughout. If you get the wrong editor, you can really muck that up. So that's really important, actually.
That's for sure.
Most people don't realize that with writing your book, you need to make sure that your editor can stay consistent with the narrative of your voice. I never knew that was a big deal until I was editing my book and I had a good editor. And one of my gal pals wrote me and said, I'm an editor, I can help. And she sent me a edit. I said, okay, well, here's a page. Let me know. Do I do something with it? Whatever you claim you're going to do. And when she sent it back, it switched to where it was a women's vernacular. And you could hear the woman in the thing. It was a woman's voice now and not a man's. And she totally wiped out my whole voice. And I was like, I see what this voice thing is all about. So
yeah.
If you're out there as an aspiring author, make sure that you get an editor that preserves your voice. Because if it doesn't, it comes out really weird.
That's for sure. And Zulon Press in Florida have published my first 4 books. When they've come back with their notes, they've not been copious, but they've been on target. And some I used and some I didn't. I'm the author. And I was fortunate enough that the people, I've had a couple people now that worked on my books. I was fortunate enough that they came back and said, this is your book. It's your ideas. These are only suggestions. You can take them or leave them. And I replied back, I will take a lot of them, but if you don't mind, and they didn't. And so I appreciated that about them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to be able to have that freedom when you're with a big, when you're with a big company, you can't do that. They want it their way or elsewise. You either edit it and get it done right, or they just don't.
Their way or the highway, right?
Yeah, that's actually the way it is. They gave me advance, and people don't realize now you're indebted to them.
You're bound. Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to have that freedom. I've had authors on the show from the top, Simon Schuster, Penguin Random House. They don't even get to choose the covers on some of the deals they do. So,
and that's another thing is that their graphic department is excellent. And they said, "Do you have any suggestions?" And I would give them my suggestions. Obviously, with Flourishing Soul, they've got to have some type of palm branches, and they did. And the book of James, I really appreciated this, and it's like a speeding highway with cars underneath, but they're all blurred out. In other words, life is going to run by really quickly, and you've got to stop and smell the roses and grab some practical wisdom along the way. So they've really captured what I think, what I wanted. And so we tweaked it a little bit. We wrote back and they were very compliant. So I appreciate that about them.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. As we round out, we covered both books, the other two, right? Or
Yes,
three?
sir.
Okay. And tell us about your upbringing. How did you know you had the ability to write books and you were going to be able to do this? When did you start writing and stuff like that?
I was raised in a Christian home. I was outside constantly. I played ball, football, basketball, baseball. I actually, in my high school career, I was beginning to be scouted by mid-major colleges in the Midwest. God got a hold of my heart and he called me into the ministry. And I went home one day and told my mom and dad that I wanted to go to a Christian school. Now, as a sidebar, there was a girl that I liked that decided to go to the same Christian school.
Huh?
And that girl was Cindy, who has been my wife now for 51 years.
Oh, congratulations.
So there was an ulterior motive on my part. But
Glad it worked out.
I did, yeah. I would say so. And when you said 6 grandkids, that's up to 9 now.
Oh,
so anyway, so I was, Chris, I was happy if I was eligible to play ball. Deceased, the 2.0 average was okay with me until I went to the Christian school. And then I realized, all right, there's a little bit more important things. My dad was a music teacher. My mom was the head payroll bookkeeper of the system that I was in Michigan. So when I went to class, teacher would read the roll the first day and say, Kevin Gephart. And they would say, is your mom Roz? Which her name was Rose. Is your name Roz? And that's my mom. And said, oh, okay. So if I did anything at school, I knew about it when I got home before, because they would call my mom in the board office. But what I'm saying is that I did not care about education. Then when I got to college, it was a little bit more serious until finally I graduated number 1 in my class. So education became very important to me. As far as writing is concerned, I've always written, but not published. And primarily I studied and studied and studied. I read my Bible through every 2 months. So I consume literature. I consume books. So again, my mom was the one that really lit the fire under me. But when I found out that day when my heart surgeon showed me my catheterization on the screen, and Chris, this is what he said. He said, Kevin, do you see, my wife, Cindy, and my youngest son, Timothy, was in the room with me. And he said, Kevin, do you see these 2 little squiggly lines going down the center of your heart? Those are called collateral arteries. If your heart didn't make those, we wouldn't be having this conversation today.
Oh, wow.
So I sat there stunned. I began to cry. Cindy began to cry. Tim began to cry. That's when I realized God left me here for a reason, and God was speaking through my mom. And that's when I started writing serious. So I wrote 4 books in 5 years. So I kept my nose to the grindstone. When I decide to do something, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to go full bore. So that's when it was. So it wasn't until 7 years ago that I began writing seriously.
Oh.
Yep.
And now you've got it down and you're pumping out books and doing all sorts of stuff.
Yes, sir.
What sort of writing process do you use? A lot of aspiring artists or authors in the audience. How do you stay on top of writing? Some people write an hour a day, or they write in the early morning. What's the process you use that found has been helpful?
As I said, as I read through, I write notes. I have blank pieces of paper in my Bible. I have stacks. My office is clean now because of this interview, but I have different stacks and different folders. When I have ideas or I come across articles, I'll copy them out. I'll put them in those folders, and then I begin to put my thoughts together, just like writing a thesis paper.
Okay.
I come up with my outline. Come up with my chapters. My new book, which, by the way, it's based on Luke 10, the Good Samaritan, and I've entitled it "Who Is My Neighbor?" and it's a book on being a servant. I gather all the material I possibly can, but as far as writing is concerned, I do like morning. I try to do an hour a day. For me, that's pretty much all that my mind can handle, unless I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
If I'm on a roll, then I'm like butter.
and you're cooking hot. Yeah, sometimes you do, and that's the great thing about having that practice is sometimes you're just going to do the hour, and then you find a lane where you just gets hot, and you're like the stories are flowing, and
absolutely, and you get a phone call. Or my wife calls and say, "Hey, let me call you back in 10 minutes. Let me finish this thought while I have this, and finish this paragraph or finish this chapter." And then I'll give you a call back. And she understands that. She's very understanding that way.
Yeah. Well, she needs money for Target.
Absolutely.
I've got friends whose wives go to Target. They go to Target twice a day. So they're active. So, and anything more I should have asked you about the books before we round out the show?
No, sir. I appreciate so much the opportunity to be here. It's an honor. It really is.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you, Kevin. You've written more books than I have, and you're kicking ass taking names out there, and you're inspiring people to hopefully do better and maybe do more good work in their local neighborhoods.
I hope so. I pray that will be the result. I know I've gotten a lot of feedback through the years I've done this, and I appreciate it.
That's the beautiful thing about authors. They touch so many people, and many times they may never see them, but they will change lives. And sometimes people come up to you and go, "Hey, you changed my life," or "You saved my life." And you're just like, okay.
Yeah, I know. It catches you off guard, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I remember thinking, no one's going to read this. It's so selfish. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on the show, Kevin. Give us your social media, websites, whatever you want to plug before we go out.
Okay. We are on, as I say, Facebook, and either with my name or The Flourishing Soul. I write a blog every day or a post, and I copy it on The Flourishing Soul. I will say my followers have tripled in doing that. They can get my books through Amazon, Barnes & Noble. All this is online. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, from Zulon Press. That's XULON, or Spring Arbor Press in Spring Arbor, Michigan, or Ingram, and they can purchase my books that way.
All right. Sounds good, man. It's wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
You got it. And folks, order up his book where refined books are sold, Unless: God's Ways of Altering Our Attitudes, Actions, and Aftermath by Kevin Gephart. Thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.